It is now expected to move forward on a vote this week to block the new criminal code in the nation's capital. But the head of the D.C. Council wrote in a letter to the upper chamber today that he's withdrawing the measure. It has all sparked debate about crime as an issue ahead of the 2024 campaign. For more on this, Nikole Killion and Nancy Cordes join us now. Nikole is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Nancy is CBS News' chief White House correspondent. Nikole, let's begin with you. How does the 2024 map for Democrats, particularly in the Senate, factor into this ongoing debate over crime in Washington, D.C.?
Well, it certainly is a potential factor, and we saw this was also a talking point in the 2022 midterms as well, with Republicans trying to cast Democrats as being soft on crime. And so that's why, in terms of this bill coming before the Senate, which, in aid to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, says that this vote will still occur this week, it is a situation where there are a number of Democrats on board. And, President Biden, of course, indicating to Democrats that he wasn't going to veto this bill, and some do think politics is at play because, in changing this criminal code, basically what it would do is potentially, change some of the provisions that are part of this, provision here in D.C. And while this seems like a very localized issue, it would change the statutes and penalties for crimes like carjackings and robberies. I mean, these are issues that affect people across the country. And so basically, proponents of this are trying to paint Democrats as being soft on crime if they vote against a provision like this, whereas Republicans are trying to use this as, a messaging bill to a certain effect. And so that is why you kind of see this tug of war, this kind of back and forth between the Senate and between the D.C. Council. It's not often that we see this kind of back and forth between Washington and the district in this sense. But it is something that has generated a lot of controversy, and the mayor of D.C. coming out today saying that she supports the council member in terms of trying to withdraw this provision, although it doesn't seem like that is possible from a statutory issue.
Nancy, what about President Biden? Where does he stand as this is all debated on Capitol Hill and elsewhere?
Well, the president essentially sided with Republicans, said that he was not going to be a party to any measure by the D.C. Council that would reduce mandatory sentences for things like carjackings. The problem is that took a lot of Democrats by surprise, and it frustrated both moderate Democrats and liberal Democrats alike. Moderate Democrats, because some of them had gone out on a limb a few weeks ago and voted against this Republican measure, not knowing that the president was going to take the stance that he did. So they felt that he put them in a difficult position. And then you've got progressive Democrats saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a president and a White House that has long said that they support statehood for D.C., that they support home rule for D.C. And if that is the case, why is this president willing to meddle in this situation, willing to overturn the will of the D.C. City Council? Even if he disagrees with them, shouldn't the principle remain that D.C. has the right to come up with its own laws and make its own decisions? So there's no question that the White House is dealing with some blowback over all of this. But at the end of the day, they're dealing with some of the same challenges that Nikole just talked about that congressional Democrats are dealing with. Accusations of being soft on crime. Clearly, we're heading into an election year, and this was a position that the president felt he needed to take.
Speaking of challenges for the White House, Nikole, West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin was on Face the Nation on Sunday, and he had this to say about a possible 2024 bid.
You've said you're not running for president. Is that an open question, though?
I didn't say that. I didn't say anything about that. The bottom line is I will make my political decision in December, whatever it may be.
To run for president?
I'm not taking anything off the table, and I'm not putting anything on the table. I said I'll make a decision in at the end of this year.
You'll make a decision at the end of this year as to who you will endorse for
what my
president.
Political future will be.
No, but for president.
What I will be involved with, how I'll be involved. I will be making any decisions I make politically will not be done until the end of the year.
Nikole, that Senator Manchin stirring the pot on Sunday. Is he still stirring the pot on Monday?
Well, I think the senator often stirs the pot, and I think those of us up here on Capitol Hill are kind of used to it and trying to interpret Manchin speak, if you will. That is something that, kind of comes with the territory being up here on the Capitol. But look, while it may have been a little confusing to follow whether or not he's talking about making a decision about president, making a decision about his Senate career, one thing that is notable, at least in terms of the Senate position, is that it's not necessarily a surprising position to take. As he made clear in that interview with Margaret, the filing deadline is not until early next year, so he doesn't feel that he has to rush to make a decision, even as we have seen other senators and candidates declare for the 2024 cycle. And keep in mind that President Biden isn't that popular in West Virginia, and so it's not uncommon sometimes to see candidates and politicians put distance between the incumbent or between their standard bearer if they are up for a potential tough re-election fight, which this could potentially be if we see, for instance, someone like Republican Governor Jim Justice try to get into this race, which is still yet to be determined. But leaving this question open as to whether or not he's going to run for president is one that does raise some questions. Again, if President Biden is kind of the standard bearer in the party and has made clear that he intends to run, why, again, Manchin wouldn't just come out and say whether or not he's going to back him or just take that off the table. And so far, he hasn't done that.
We are still waiting to see what Senator Manchin does, but we do know that President Biden will face a primary challenge from at least one Democrat, Marianne Williamson, the self-help author and longtime activist. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, was asked about Ms. Williamson today. Let's listen.
If I had what is it called, a little globe here, crystal ball, then I can tell you. But I imagine 8-ball, whatever. If I could feel her aura, I just don't have anything. I just don't have anything to share on that.
Nancy, my sources close to President Biden told me over the weekend they don't expect the president to engage much with Ms. Williamson. Yet today, the White House press secretary seeming to mock his first primary challenger.
Right. A joke and not a joke at the same time, right? You heard the laughter from within the White House press room as the White House press secretary made a pretty clear reference to Marianne Williamson's background as a kind of New Age spiritual healer. The reality is that while they don't want to give her candidacy too much oxygen, I mean, she's someone who, when she ran in the past, was only at a couple percentage points in the polls. At the same time, they want to discourage any additional Democrats from jumping into this race because it just raises all kinds of difficult questions for this White House. What do you do about primary debates, for example? How much time would the president have to spend actually going after some of these primary opponents? How much would he have to worry that they might attack him from the left? So they don't view Williamson herself as any kind of major threat, but it does create an additional wrinkle that they'd love to not have to deal with. And they're worried about the possibility of multiple wrinkles if any other Democrats decide they want to get into the race too.
Nikole Killion and Nancy Cordes, thank you.